Hello, I'm Msgr Jim Lisante. Today on Personally Speaking, I'll be joined by Congressman Darin LaHood. Congressman LaHood has represented the 18th District of Illinois since 2015 and says he is proud and honored to be pro-life. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Congressman Darin LaHood joins me now. Congressman LaHood, born and raised in Peoria, serves the 18th District of Illinois since 2015 after his special election win. Congressman LaHood recently won re-election to serve his third full term in Congress. Prior to his election in Congress, Congressman LaHood served 4 years in the Illinois State Senate, and he spent more than 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor. Congressman LaHood serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and on the U.S. Joint Economic Committee. The congressman is a practicing Catholic who pledges to continue as an active advocate in Congress for protecting life and preserving the right of the unborn. He's married to Kristen and is the father of 3 sons, McKay, Teddy, and Luke, and is here with us today to talk about the issues that matter the most to him, as well as the importance of his Catholic faith and what it means to him to be pro-life. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Congressman Darin LaHood. Congressman, one of the first members of Congress that I had a close friendship with was a fellow you may or may not know named Ray McGrath. Now, he had 10 terms in Congress from Long Island, New York. What struck me, though, watching Ray over those years, because we were good friends, was the difficulty of balance between the demands of the job and trying to be a good family man. Have you found the magical way to make that all come together?
Well, I'm still learning that, Monsignor. First of all, thanks for having me on. And Ray McGrath is a tremendous person. I know Ray well. We did not serve together, obviously, but when I first got to Congress, he's been a mentor to me and a good friend. And he served on the Ways and Means Committee, which I also serve on the Ways and Means Committee.
That's right.
And you're exactly right, Monsignor. Finding that balance between family and work is really important. And my wife and I are blessed to have 3 teenage boys that we raise in Peoria, Illinois. And so I commute every week to D.C. But when I ran for this job almost 5 years ago, that's one of the things that my wife and I talked about and we prayed about, is making sure that we have the proper balance. And obviously, faith and family come first, and work comes after that. And so, I'm not sure that I've perfected it, but a couple constant things that keep me going. Obviously, constant communication with my wife and kids back home, whether it's FaceTiming, whether it's talking on the phone. And then going back every single weekend and being engaged with my kids, whether it's their sporting activities, whether it's their school, whether it's doing things together. I was fortunate to have a great mom and dad and siblings that I was raised in. And so a lot of that is foundation too. But I'm honored to serve in Congress in the district that I do, and to have the family life and the wife that I have. I couldn't do it without them.
Well, thanks, Congressman. Let me ask you, you just mentioned them, perfect segue. When you look at Kathy and Ray, your parents, and look at the way they raised you, what specifically did they do right in raising you and your siblings?
Well, I don't know necessarily what they did right, but, for us, really a focus on doing the right thing, making the right decisions, and being humble. And I often think about, again, I'm from Peoria, Illinois. I think about my father is Lebanese, and we grew up, we're Christian Lebanese, Maronite. And I think about my grandparents and my family there in Peoria. They were my great-grandparents were immigrants from Lebanon, and they came from a little village called I-2 Lebanon in the northern part of the country, a Christian village. And about 100 years ago, they came off that mountain, got on a ship, and came through Ellis Island. And when they came through Ellis Island, they got on a train, and the last stop on the train was Kewanee, Illinois, right outside of Peoria.
Wow.
And like a lot of immigrant families, similar story. They didn't speak any English. They didn't have any money. They had a strong faith in God. And they had an American dream, like many others, that has been the foundation for the country we have today. And I thank God for what they put a focus on, which was those things I mentioned, but also on education and making life better for the next generation. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about my dad was the first one in his family to go to college, and my sister was the first one to go to medical school, and I was the first one to go to law school. And I think back to my great-grandparents and what they instilled and what my parents instilled in us, which is, again, playing by the rules, having a strong faith in God, being focused on family and education, and working hard. That there's nobody that's going to give you a handout or help you. The government needs to be there to help people, there's no doubt. But that American dream, that not just my family, many other families have experienced the same thing, that there is a success in that. But my parents put a strong emphasis on those things. And of course, Catholic education and going to church. I went for 8 years to Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school and a Catholic college. And while I maybe wasn't always the best student when it came to religion, those foundational things of my Catholic faith and religion and the sisters I had and the teachers I had and the priests that I had were all things that helped me to get to the position I am today. So those are a few of my thoughts, Monsignor.
Sure, no. Congressman, that's a very important topic you raised, in the way in which your grandparents came to this country. One of the great dividing issues in our country now is the issue of immigration. We need people to come and begin new and wonderful lives here, but we want to do it legally. Have you got any insight into how we can finally reconcile this issue and move forward instead of it just being a shooting match, one side against another? How do we progress in terms of allowing immigrants to come in legally and do it in a way that enhances our country?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we haven't had much progress in Congress in the 5 years that I've been there, but I am committed to doing everything I can to continue the tradition of legal immigration into this country. And right now, Monsignor, as you may be aware, we let in about 1.2 million legal immigrants every year. And I tell people, if you've never been to a ceremony at a federal courthouse when you bring new immigrants in, you ought to go, because it's inspiring in many ways, where you see people that have done exactly what we've asked them to do. They usually go back to their country of origin. They take a constitution test. They go through a background check. They're thoroughly vetted, and they come to this country and they go through that ceremony to become legal citizens. And I've been to many of them, but they end up being our best citizens. And they're people that we really never have to worry about again, but they're so proud. They're so honored to be U.S. citizens. The problem is, from my point of view, we need to reform that system. It shouldn't take 2 or 3 or 4 years to legally immigrate to this country. We need to expand the amount of folks that we bring into this country. We're capped at 1.1, 1.2. What I've said is we ought to be able to tier that approach up. Go up a couple 100,000 every year and do that. We haven't done that. So I'm supportive of those things. I also think there has to be some recognition of merit-based immigration. Right now, about 8% of the legal immigrants we bring into the country are based on merit or skill. The others are based on a family connection. They're based on chain migration. And some of those things have been useful. But I think expanding that to more merit-based and skill-based is something that we have to look at to do that. And all those things I just mentioned, Monsignor, have bipartisan support. The problem is many of our legal immigration debates get tied to illegal immigration.
Right.
What's going on the southern border. And so that has complicated things, unfortunately, in many ways. I think there is a path for our DACA recipients that are here that we ought to look at in a thoughtful way to figure out how we work through that. But solving illegal immigration and what we do, obviously we have to enforce the rule of law, but we have to be compassionate in the way that we do that. And so I do think there is a path forward. It has to be done in a bipartisan way. And I have tried to be part of the solution when it comes to that. But it's clearly something we have to do. We have to honor that tradition of the melting pot that this country is, and the diversity and the fabric of what those immigrants bring to make us the greatest country in the world, and not forget that it's because of that, the immigration over the last 200 plus years that has put us in the position we are today.
Our guest is Congressman Darin LaHood. Congressman, up until recently in New York here, we had at St. Patrick's Cathedral the body of Archbishop Fulton Sheen, the legendary and iconic priest. You know, and I know that his body has been moved now to your congressional district, to St. Mary's Cathedral, I think, right? And in Peoria. Tell us a little bit about what Archbishop Fulton Sheen means to an area like yours.
Well, I can't tell you how proud I am to represent the district where Archbishop Fulton Sheen was born and raised and started his career. You know, we are so blessed to have that history. And you correctly said we recently just got his body back from St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. I represent a small little town called El Paso, Illinois, which is in rural Woodford County, which is the birthplace of Fulton Sheen. And for your listeners out there, if you could go to this small little community and see just how tiny and quaint it is, but a very rural, in the middle of central Illinois, a farming community. And that's where Fulton Sheen was born at. And then he came not far to Peoria. He went to the same high school that I graduated from, Spalding Institute, which was an all-boys Catholic school in Peoria, and graduated from there, and then started his career as a priest. But he went on to really evangelize on behalf of the Catholic Church, and was really the first, bishop and orator that was on TV. Right. And the impact that he had both in this country and all around the world on preaching the Catholic faith, really tremendous. And so when you think about his career, I didn't have the opportunity when I was alive to be around him, but I've listened to many of his speeches and many of his television appearances. And so he is on the process to sainthood, which we hope will happen soon. We are preparing that, as you mentioned, at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, to have that done. And the process is still going through, but we've made a lot of progress in terms of bringing the body back, which was a little bit of an issue. But when you think about, again, his impact, his stature in the Catholic Church, and what he did to help the Catholic Church, it's really tremendous. And the other point that I will mention is the miracle that he was involved with a young boy in Metamora, Illinois, right outside of Peoria, that was saved because his mother prayed to Archbishop Fulton Sheen. The baby had been dead for over 45 minutes, and she said prayers, and he was brought back to life. And it's really remarkable, but it goes to show the impact and the reverence that we have for Fulton Sheen and what he was able to do there, and in many other instances. So we're preparing, we're working with the church, and we hope to soon have a wonderful pilgrimage for people to come to Peoria to see Fulton Sheen and learn more about the history and the impact that he's had on our church.
Congressman, I want to ask you an interesting question. I think interesting. I get to do a lot of weddings, as most priests do, probably about 100 a year. And to prepare for those celebrations, I often ask the couples to write me an essay of why of the billion people out there you might have married, why is this the one? You are blessed with Kristen as a wife. If I had been the priest to marry you and I'd asked you to do the same thing, what is it about her that made you know what, this is the person I'm supposed to spend my life with?
Well, I tell people all the time, when I introduce my wife at political events, Monsignor, I often introduce her and say that I may be the congressman, but she's the Speaker of the House, and she is. I would not have the success that I've had in my career as a lawyer and a prosecutor and as a member of Congress without my wife, Kristen. But we've had a great bond with each other. I love her dearly, and I think about all of over the past 20 years we've been married and raising our 3 kids, and all those things that she's been there for me, whether it's her love, whether it's her motherly instincts, whether it's helping to take care of the household when I've been out and campaigning and doing the work that I've done. She's been there for us. And again, I feel we both got married a little later in life. I was 33, she was 31. We had never been married before. But it was really wonderful that she was from Peoria and I was from Peoria. We had never met before, but when we did, it was we hit it right off. And again, I feel that God was looking down upon both of us when that happened, and I couldn't ask for a better partner and spouse and loving wife than Kristen.
Now, Congressman, you and Kristen are blessed with these 3 teenage sons, as you mentioned. Do you have any insight into, because I guess every parent listening to this and grandparent would wonder, is there a right or wrong way to pass on the values that mean the most to you to these kids that you love?
Well, I'm always seeking advice on raising teenage boys because we'll see how they turn out. But, I go back to, again, Kristen comes from a wonderful family in Peoria too, but I often think about the example that her parents that have been married for almost 55 years and my parents for 54 years. And I often tell my 3 boys to spend time around their grandparents and how lucky they are to have 4 grandparents around in the example they set. But family is important. I think humility is important. I think, again, the teachings of the Catholic Church when it relates to integrity and courage and the example that Jesus set for us, I mean, those are all things that we've tried to instill in our kids. I mean, you never know how they're going to turn out, Monsignor. And believe me, I've had trials and tribulations. We all have. Yeah. But you want to give them that foundation when you're raising them so that when you send them out to the world, those things that you've tried to teach them are going to be there to protect them. And so it's a combination of things that we have to go through. I think discipline is a big part of that too. And not spoiling your kids and finding that balance is important. I always, sports, my kids are pretty good athletes. I'm sure every parent says that, but I always say that my wife was she was a college basketball player and a very good athlete. And I tell my boys, if they get mom's ability and my height, because I'm about 6, they're going to be good. But I also think you learn a lot more from losing. And I always tell my boys that when you lose, it's how you lose and how you react. And that goes for in life too. Things don't work out in how you learn from losing and take that and set future goals and come back stronger and look for opportunities. And that's been a part of how we've raised our boys also.
Congressman LaHood is our guest. Here's an interesting question. A few months ago, we had Congressman Lipinski from Chicago on, and he knew that remaining pro-life would probably cost him both the nomination and election because his party was so determinedly pro-choice. But he said, at the end of the day, I have to answer to God, not to the Democratic Party. But I was struck by the fact that he was willing to take a stand on an issue that was going to cost him. I think we certainly are a very divided country, as you know. But when you've been faced with the need to compromise, how do you maintain your values, but at the same time work in a real world politically? And I'm thinking back in 1996, our Republican Party had asked me to run as a Republican for Congress. And Cardinal O'Connor at that time in New York said to me, don't do it because it's really, really hard to go into politics and to maintain your soul. So how do you do it, Congressman? How do you remain true to the values that matter the most to you, but also deal with real politics?
Yeah, well, you hit on a number of important topics, and I'm glad you raised that. I mean, we live in a political world. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, I was just fortunate enough to get reelected here. And by the way, I have immense respect for Dan Lipinski and have worked with him closely. Actually, he and I. We have the largest pro-life rally in Illinois. It's been in Chicago the last few years. And Dan and I always, we've spoken at it the last several years, he being the Democrat, I being the Republican. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know which party title we have, but right. We've both spoken, about our votes and our advocacy for life. and proudly have done that in front of thousands of people in downtown Chicago, and I hope to continue to do that. But you know, when I ran for this job, I was transparent and upfront about why I'm pro-life and why I'm gonna, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, to go to Congress and vote that way. I mean, part of that is my Catholic upbringing. Part of it is the way that I was raised and the community I was raised in. And I also use the example often, Monsignor. I'm 52 years old. I was born in 1968. And when I talk to school groups, which I like to do, and I talk to other folks, when I talk about the issue of life, I bring up, I have 3 friends of mine that are about the same age as me, born in 68 or 69, that were all adopted. All of them are wildly successful now. One is a professor, one is a very accomplished businessman, and the other one is a very good teacher. But all of them, again, of course, Roe versus Wade was codified in 1973. But I think about if their mothers and families had made the decision to abort them, we would have never known them and what they had done. And now all of them have wonderful families. They're contributing to society. And so that's never left me when I think about the issue of life. They never would have existed or been here if abortion maybe had been legal in 1968 or 69 when they were born. And so that I use that as an example when I talk to folks and talk about being pro-life. But it is something that, and I also will say, you know, surrounding yourself with other like-minded people. I've tried to do that in Washington, D.C., particularly on the issue of life.
I promise to wrap this up soon, but let me ask you this. Do you have any insight too, and you live in a state in Illinois where you're on the divide in many ways? You know, I grew up in the 60s, so I remember the divisions we had then. I would have hoped in 2020 we would have moved past them. We obviously haven't. Is there a way for us to be reconciled as a country and not to be balkanized over the racial issue? How do we come together and put aside our racial differences and realize we're all Americans at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, you know, we haven't reached that point yet. And I, from a broader perspective, what I think about, Monsignor, is, you know, our country has been around for 240 years, roughly. And I would argue we have the greatest country in the history of the world. And I say that humbly, but when you think about the freedoms that we have, when you think about the prosperity that we have, and you think about, again, that American dream, that you can come from any background, you can come from any place, and you can come to America, and if you work hard and play by the rules and have a strong faith in God, you can become president of the United States, you can become CEO, you can become a world-class athlete, whatever it is that you want to do.
Right.
And that is unique to America. Remember, there's over 7 billion people in this world, and America makes up roughly 4.5% of that 7 billion. It's small. Yeah. But I don't think it can be understated why people want to come to this country. You know, we use that term American dream, Monsignor, but and that's a cliche, but let me just tell you, there's no European dream or China dream or Africa dream. There's only one dream, and that's the American dream. And we tend to forget about that because we're busy in our lives in this country, right? We're almost in a bubble in some ways when you think about the world, particularly when you think about, you know, roughly 40 or 45% of the 7 billion people in this world are below the poverty line. And you know, I often think about what's his name? Warren Buffett always talks about he won the ovarian lottery. And what does he mean by that? I think about that too. I won the ovarian lottery because, I mean, why was I born to the parents that I was in Peoria, Illinois, and not born in Nigeria or Pakistan or, you know, some other place around the world? And so, I mean, it's hard to sit back and think about how lucky we are, but we are because of the country we have. Now, to your question and your point, do we have flaws? Of course we do. Have we had things that we've done in this country that we are regretful of? Yes, we are. But what I hope we've learned is we've learned from those mistakes. We've gotten better. We've tried to bring people together, but clearly there are things we need to work on. And I think the racial disparities that we saw this summer and the tragic killing and murder of George Floyd brought a lot of that back. And it just goes to show there are things we still have to work on to harmonize and bring this country together. But I wouldn't trade America with any other country in the world. because of the things and the values we have here. But it's incumbent upon us in Congress and the American people to continue to work on ways that we can do better. Faith plays a tremendous role in that also, in how we can bring people together. And so it is imperfect in many ways, but it's the best country on the face of the earth. I'm convinced of that. And working in a collaborative way to make it better is what our goals should be.
I want to thank Congressman Darin LaHood for being with us on Personally Speaking. He said something early in this interview that was striking to me, that it's important to be in public service, and he's a wonderful public servant, very dedicated to working with everyone to make sure that our country continues to advance. But he also says in your life, you've got to get two things in squared away. You got to have a good relationship with God, good relationship with your family. Everything else is secondary after that, and he tries to live it. And I'm so grateful for his witness, both as a congressperson, but also as a man of faith, as a man of family. And what you notice if you're listening to this interview is Congressman LaHood never sounds hopeless. He's thrilled with the fact that we're in the greatest country in the world. He loves his faith, he loves his family, and he has great, great hope. And I'm just hoping that we can build on the hope of Congressman LaHood. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. You're wonderful. Keep on keeping on. We need people like you in public service.
Well, thank you, Monsignor. It's a pleasure to be on with you and your listeners today. God bless everybody. And we'll welcome everyone to Peoria, Illinois in the future to visit Archbishop Fulton Sheen.
As we end today's program, I want to thank all of you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. All one word, closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, please go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. You can also listen to past episodes by going to www.ollmp.org, ollmp.org, and you get not only recent shows, but also Monsignor Jim's weekly homilies. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jadovitz, and thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.